Hi, this is Damien from AtHope, and I'm an axiological atheist, which can simply be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. And I'm here with a special guest today that I've watched almost all of his videos on his channel. Go ahead and tell us your name and a little bit about you.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm Stefan Milo, and I have a YouTube channel under the same name, and I make videos about archaeology, anthropology, human evolution, mainly about prehistory. That's probably the thing I'm mostly interested in.
So would you classify yourself as being interested in anthropology then, which is kind of the story of human origins from any, source, sort of?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah. I mean, there's something, I just find this interesting. I like any animal that lives in a society, I suppose. Like, other than humans, my favorite animal is probably ants. I just
Ants?
like the complexity that, yeah.
Right on.
The complexity that comes with living in societies and things like that. There's always something interesting going on. So that's what drives my interest. Anytime you speak to someone who's passionate about something, it's interesting no matter what they do, really, even if that's not your personal passion. So
yeah, that's a good point. That I also like my stuff to generally be authentic, and so that's why I have even if I do a debate against someone who I disagree, it's more of a discussion to me because I like honest conversation.
Yeah.
So I try to speak honestly and then listen honestly. Like, some people when they do a lot of waiting to talk rather than listening, and so I try to work on doing both listening and talking.
That's a skill. It's a skill for sure, being a good listener.
What made you, in a sense, start the show you're doing?
There's two reasons, really. The first being it keeps me in touch with the subject that I studied at university, archaeology, prehistory. I graduated university about 10 years ago in the last recession and was not able to pursue a career in archaeology.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
So it just, it's okay. Everything happens for a reason, in a way. Or maybe not, as we'll discuss when we talk about atheism and things, who knows. But it keeps me in touch with the subject that I like, that I'm interested in. And more sort of mercenary motivations are, I just want to have a job that is fulfilling
right.
and interesting. So if I can make money by studying what I love, then why not aim for that?
That's a good goal, and I like the fact that not only do your shows, teaching stuff, it's done in a little bit funner way. Like I address on a lot of my stuff, especially my blog, archaeology and anthropology and history and stuff and prehistory. And I try to make it not as dry as like a research paper, and try to give my speculations and ideas to things to help people kind of understand different thinking. But I think it's an important thing, though, to have people doing what you're doing, going out there and saying the truth about history, because, man, if you look at, the YouTube, you can find plenty of absolute bollocks and dog shit type of, shows that, it's like anti-history. You watch it and you get stupider, you don't become informed. Of course,
I have the 3 golden rules on my channel that I use to try and maintain the quality. That is, only use academic sources, well-researched sources. I always publish them in the description, so anyone is free to read for themselves why I said what I said. And I always try and be clear when I'm giving my own personal speculations or theories, so people are free to tune that out and not take that so seriously, because as you say, there's a lot of, especially in the realm of prehistory, there's just so much nonsense on the internet. And I didn't realize the extent of it until I made a video about how the Egyptians might have built the pyramids. Obviously, we don't know for sure,
right.
But likewise, we don't know nothing either. So I was just talking through evidence from the quarries and written records and all of this, and literally thousands of people hopped in the comments. They were shocked that I believe the Egyptians built the pyramids. As shocked as I was that they think the Egyptians didn't build them, they were shocked that I could put all that research in and still come to the conclusion that the Egyptians built the pyramids. And that was when I realized the sort of prevalence of you could politely call them alternative ideas, but they're really not backed up by any research, any credible research. So I took other issues to task, like the Solutrean Hypothesis, the idea that the first people in the Americas were Europeans and that they were entirely wiped out by an incoming group of...
And left no bones to identify, right?
Exactly, and any time you hear it a lot with pyramids and with the Solutrean Hypothesis, I can't believe any time someone says a civilization was totally wiped out. That just doesn't happen. People have sex with each other.
Yeah, even the Neanderthal.
Yeah, exactly. Even hominins that who knows how much they were like us, we've still thought, oh, well, I'll have sex with them, why not? So this idea that Europeans could have spread across North and South America and be 100% wiped out by an incoming group of people in prehistory, before planes and vehicles and anything, it defies reason, it really does.
Well, I agree. So I tell people, I'm willing to, in a sense, look down rabbit holes. I'm just not willing to eat the rabbit shit, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm open to entertain ideas that seem supported, I just started a show called History Voyagers, and I wanted to do Göbekli Tepe, but I wanted to really, really explain all the different things. So I'm making 10 videos of it, and I'm addressing, the whole site itself, and then addressing after that the pillars, like sort of like what they mean and their things. And I'm addressing the sky burials, and then the skull cult, and then obsidian, how the obsidian trade starts before Göbekli Tepe, and then how it relates to all these different sites, interacting, and then the agriculture and farming, and how that relates. But everything's separate, and trying to make it really, because it's just, someone told me one time, hey, have you checked out this one show on Göbekli Tepe? And I watched it. I'm like, yeah, that's not true. That's not even accurate. I mean, and I think it's weird too, is like you said, your speculation. The thing that people don't realize, some speculations are speculated from a source of evidence, and other speculations are like just other, woo-woo bollocks that people just like grab out of the air or something, I mean, like there's some reason, like when I say, that I think that shamanism happened in Russia and Siberia, I'm particularly talking about a certain graviton, burials, then spread to the Czech Republic when there's this very strange female burial where she's buried with part of a fox and two mammoth scapulas, and then there's a little bit of a writing on it, and there's red ochre on her head, and so that's different when it's a lot of like reasons why I'm kind of trying to think that it has to do with shamanism. That's the big difference than somebody who says just blatantly, oh, aliens built the pyramids. Why do you think that? Oh, well, because humans couldn't. Like, well, you actually don't know that, and you can't show that. And we know that the thing is dated to the people. It's dated. Like as one guy was saying, oh, how come there's perfect, alignment of the shafts? I'm like, they're not perfect. You ever seen a picture of them? They're not perfect. And when I showed him, and he still wanted to believe, it's like, it reminds me of faith people do in religion. It's an ancient alien faith. The facts just don't seem to be like Teflon. They don't stick. It's not reasonable. There's no reason, there's no evidence source that's credible you're starting with to even support any of this. Sorry, go ahead. You still there? Stefan? Hello?
Hey, I'm sorry, Damien. Did I drop the connection?
Yeah, you dropped the connection. I was explaining that, there's a big difference in how you speculate, difference in the quality of source that you're starting from. When you start, well, I think there could be aliens. Why do you think that? Well, because there's a big universe. Oh, that's not evidence.
Yeah, not all speculations are...
No.
Speaking of Russia, though, I know you mentioned Russia.
Yeah, Russia.
Did you see it was either in Russia or Ukraine, the large mammoth building that was
I think it. Yeah, I think it was Russia, but it could have been Ukraine. Yeah, well, there's actually one at 44,000 is the first one, and it probably connects to Neanderthals. What's interesting too is the same area that the first one, the Neanderthals, does. All around it, humans do it. I think that's really interesting. To me, there could have been, besides sharing our genes, there could have been, transfer of ideas or transfer of technologies. Certainly, when it seems like when humans met Neanderthals in the Middle East about 100,000 years ago, or 115 or 10, that the Neanderthals might have showed us, in some way how to do their mouse steering tools, their stone tool technology, because the graves that are buried there that are, modern humans, those are a form of in a sense, Neanderthal tools.
Yeah, it's how there's cross-cultural interactions work is really interesting. The hard thing about it is, I was talking to Dr. Rag Sykes about Neanderthals on my channel, and one of the hard things is we have the first good evidence for Homo sapiens in Europe around 40,000-ish years ago. But that doesn't mean to say that groups temporarily entered and left and all this stuff, because obviously the archaeological record that we have is obviously only a tiny fraction of what went on.
Oh, definitely, I agree. There's
it's always hard to...
like a lot of people would say that the Orcanation culture before the Gravitans are basically the ones that. But when did they first come in? If you look at the thing, they have pre-Orcanation, Orcanation, and then early Orcanation or something like that. And then there's like a Bodouin or something actually before that. So they have like these 3 times that the Orcanation culture kind of comes into Europe separately. And then they have this other culture that's actually even earlier than that. So, but it kind of goes just straight up. I like the fact that you addressed that no ancient aliens, and I like the fact. So I really feel like you're adding something, that's needed, and you do it in a fun way. I wouldn't do it as fun. I don't have that, I guess, quirky personality like you do. I'm more of a serious kind of person. But I wanted to say, though, I do appreciate, because it is funny. You make, the history a lot more interesting. And so I do think that, you're filling a niche.
I try, yeah. I have a hard time taking myself too seriously. So hopefully I'm always the butt of the jokes. That's like the comedy I aim for, is that, if you haven't seen my video, anyone watching this, most of the time I talk into a plastic spoon, and because it's just easier to hold a microphone that way, and who cares if you're on camera talking into a spoon, I don't take myself so seriously.
It is true, though, that you do serious stuff. I mean, it's not like just pushing nonsense or something. I mean, you do credible stuff, but yeah, you do it in a more lighthearted way, which, like I said, I think is probably more approachable for some people. So it's not like that. It's not like people want to watch a Stanford, university, professor give a speech if they don't really have to.
Even though all those videos are on YouTube and they just don't get a lot of views, partly because not everyone has an hour or two to listen through the ins and outs of all the information, and partly because there is a gap in vocabulary. Like, I try and I get rid of basically almost any technical vocabulary in my videos. For example, I'm working on a video now about Miocene hominins, like our earliest upright walking bipedal ancestors, and the vocabulary in the books is horrible. If you're just a regular person without any background in it, you couldn't understand what they're saying at all. It's all like proximal, distal, phalanx.
Right.
And it's like, just say their toe. Like, their toe looks like they walked upright.
Yeah, I had to read, because I want to understand myself more accurately. I have read tons of archaeology stuff. I have like probably about 5 at least books that are archaeology. They're like $100, $200 books, college books for archaeology, of religion especially. But yeah. And I've also read like about 10,000 articles. But one of the articles I read speaking about words, they were angry that archaeologists were using the word skull because they wanted it to be specific to the crania, and they were talking about different stuff. This was a whole article. I'm like, oh man, what a beating. I mean, everyone knows what a skull is. It's like, but understand, it was talking about accuracy because because different countries, could label what a skull is to them as different, than a skull cap or a thing. They were just talking about all this different stuff. So I know that it's hard for people to approach.
Yeah,
so
I mean, I understand how, every bone in the body has its specific anatomical name. So for the sake of your research report, you put the specific name of the very specific bone.
Right.
But when it's time to share your ideas with the public, just say toe.
Right.
Say their toe bone.
Right, exactly.
It's kind of funny. And if anyone who's interested can look up what like a proximal distal phalanx is or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. Just like I know when they say something like stone tool, they'll say it's a core, it's bifaced, chipped off microliths or something. Anyways, but they go into all this technology about talking about the stuff that like stone tool. It just that gives it's an old stone tool. Okay, good.
Yeah.
That's all you really need to know.
Yeah.
You got this archaeology degree, and you're an atheist, is that correct?
Yeah.
Right.
I would say I am, yeah.
So were you, in a sense, raised an atheist, or did you come to that at a later time, raised religious?
I wasn't raised religious at all, really. I might have occasionally gone to church with one of my grandmas, but I don't come from a religious family. Especially my father, my dad and his dad were pretty anti-religious. My grandfather was from Yugoslavia, and during World War II, he had a pretty horrific time. He was, living in abject poverty, fighting. He was only 17 at the time the war started. How when he was passing through a village, they had almost no food, nothing. But the priest still had everything and was encouraging them to continue fighting and all of this, whilst that priest was leading a perfectly comfortable life, and my granddad was the one starving to death, taking all the risk. And from that moment on, I don't know that he ever really went into a church again after that. Moved to Britain, married my grandma, my Irish Catholic grandma, and they sent my father to Catholic school. And he, had the standard Catholic education at the time, horribly violent, very just nasty. And so he was like, well, I'm never going to church again. So I wasn't really raised religious, but it wasn't out of any great philosophical conviction of my parents. They just personally bad experiences with the religions that they were brought up in, I think. So, but I didn't really think anything of it. It wasn't until I went to university and I read Christopher Hitchens' God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything. Yeah.
Right.
That I had ever had sort of atheism explained in a coherent, it was eye-opening from that moment. I've never looked back really. I know that the new atheists like Dawkins and Hitchens and Sam Harris now are almost controversial figures. I've never read any book. There's never been any book that's had as big an impact on my life as Christopher Hitchens' book. To read that. The coherent ideas around atheism changed my life forever, for sure.
Right on. So did that change your views at all, or your approach in school, or didn't do that?
I don't know. I mean, the two things happened at the same time, so it'd be hard to say if one affected. Studying ancient history and prehistory, you realize the amount of gods that have come and gone. Endless gods, thousands of gods.
Right.
So, and at the same time, I'm reading Christopher Hitchens, and so the idea that any religion at the moment could have the claim to truly understand God, to me, is just ridiculous. 1,000 years, there'll be another God, and people will look at the Christian God and think that was ridiculous. The same way we look at Zeus.
Right. They'll
look back at Jesus and Muhammad and or Allah or anything and have a similar opinion, maybe. So it's just funny. I mean, it's just not a credible idea that a world the pipeline to the creator of the universe. Just don't believe it.
Yeah, especially with no evidence.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. What's the evidence?
Yeah, for me, I was 35 years old, believing Christian, never knew an atheist, didn't ever read an atheist book. I didn't even know there was an atheism. I didn't know about Dawkins or anybody. I was very, very ignorant. I was raised in a cult till 13, Christian cult, and then I was an evangelical Pentecostal. And we were so believing that the world was going to end at 2000. It was like, why care? I mean, like people were like asked me before when I was a Christian, did I believe in evolution? I would have probably said, yeah, whatever, because the world was going to end. It didn't matter. What happened before, in a sense, the Bible just did not matter. So it wasn't worth arguing about to me. I was so fanatical and delusional, that I bought it 100% into the guys. People were like, well, maybe you weren't a real Christian. I was a real Christian. I was so delusional. I remember one time I was in a plane and I thought God had a plan for my life. I was in a plane. The woman next to me was terrified. And I said, you're good, because if the plane crashes, God has a plan for my life, so I will live. If you're next to me, you'll probably be benefited. I mean, I was just hook, line, sinker delusional. And for me, it was really the archaeology stuff that started. This was facts. And that's what really started me thinking, this Bible can't be true, because it just doesn't match the facts. And so it really helped me to get out of, the belief. But then as soon as I stopped believing, I realized people have been lying to me my whole life. People that I trusted and cared about. And now what? I didn't, and then I went online and started Facebook, started talking to a few atheists, but they seemed like they knew, or they felt like they knew what was going on. And I didn't really know, because I felt like, well, I don't know now who to trust, So that's where I started really looking in from that point to all the way till now, looked into archaeology and prehistory and history. I wanted to know, how did religion start? Okay, I mean, a lot of people are atheists are saying it starts from this or that, or I wanted to know. I want to know what's the oldest stuff. Where did this happen? Then I started to learn more, and I said, okay, well, what came before that? Was there anything before that, or how did we even start symbolism? How did we start? Like you said about caring about evolution, but more anthropology about human only. That's like I'm very, in a sense, anthropocentric towards what relates to human. And I do think that, like your shows that you have on Paranthropus, Boise, and stuff like that, that's interesting to me too, because I see those as basically kind of like the pre-humans anyway. So it still relates to how we got to us.
Yeah, I mean, I often wonder that I often wonder similar things like with the Paranthropus family of hominids and Australopithecines and Homo erectus, like earlier hominins. I mean, from my own speculation, I would consider everything 100% human really as far back as Homo erectus.
Right.
I really wonder if, further back we could see traits in our extremely distant ancestors that we could point to as like precursors of all these things: religion, symbolic behavior, all these things. I often wonder how far back in time we can see the traces of that.
Don't you think about 1 million years ago with the Acheulean tools that starts to show that? I mean, why are they so symmetric? Why do they have this similar design? Why is that design copied from for almost, an unimaginable amount of time? Why? Yeah. Why not make it just so it's sharp, one side? Why biface it? Why make it round at the back and pointed in the front? I mean, it's like, and then they're done with such a kind of a unnecessary, overdone symmetry. It's like, why? I mean, was somebody like checking them and going, that's not good enough? I mean,
yeah. I mean, it could be that.
It would at least have to be aesthetic, right?
I think they'd have had a sense of aesthetic and things like that. I can't remember the site exactly, the name of it. It's over in the Philippines, but it's believed to have been produced by Homo erectus hominins that has evidence of art. Now, this is way towards the end of the lifespan of Homo erectus.
Right.
Because that species did exist for an incredibly long time.
And it evolved too. I mean, it's not like the Homo erectus was the same from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, exactly. But I think they'd have had a sense of aesthetic appreciation, because you do see stone tools as well, where they have deliberately left a fossilized shell in the middle of the stone tool.
Yep, I agree.
And I can't think that they didn't do that deliberately.
Oh, that's absolutely. And there's more than one. I don't think there's just one that's like that. That has, and they definitely created stuff that had like faces in it, with like one eye open, one eye closed sometimes. I mean, why? And just like, I know some of them, they didn't actually modify themselves. They just gathered and then transferred long distances, special rocks and stuff. Yeah, that has to be something. I mean, just like there's a wolf tooth pendant that's 300,000 years old. Doing what with that? I mean, or certainly it's a wolf tooth with a hole in the end for some reason.
That's the thing. It is hard to say. Whether there's the big debate about the Krapina cave in Croatia.
Right.
They found eagle
talons, right? Yeah, 130,000.
10, 15 of them, something like that. And they have wear marks on them, which you could interpret as them being worn as a necklace, perhaps, or something like that.
Or a bracelet, or hanging off a spear.
It's hard to, because we didn't, we can't ask them. We can only make an educated
speculation, or it's a conjecture where it's not like blind out of faith out of nowhere. It's taking something and it's going, this looks like it could be this behavior.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly I know that. That's why I think it's funny sometimes that if that was found in a human thing, we would just immediately say, oh, well, it's a necklace, or it's
yeah, there'd be no question.
the same exact stuff that the people, and I think that probably the earliest archaeology before it was super scholarly probably ruined that by making people believe that, you know, it's because things that, even if something's not true, I mean, you obviously know this as an atheist, people believe things that are absolutely not true, have no substance for why that they believe them, and yet they believe them with fervor. I mean, determinative, you know. So the fact that I think it's also in our minds. We got a believing brain. We like to believe things, and it probably evolutionary was beneficial. Someone says there's something scary around the corner. If we believe them and just run, or do we go look and die? So I mean, I think you know, the ones that trusted other people to maybe just run, you know, like the herd sheep, you know, they all kind of go one direction. The fact of us kind of doing some of that herd behavior is probably, you know, beneficial evolutionarily. But so I can see where the error already is built in. This believing.
We're just designed to cooperate.
Right.
You couldn't. I mean, I love ants. I think ants are brilliant, but you can't find a species that cooperates on the level that humans do, really. I mean, and our whole psychology is developed around that, believing one another.
Oh, definitely.
One another, sharing ideas. So
we have mirror neurons.
It really takes root. It's going to be hard to get rid of.
Yeah. Well, that's why to me, I always tell people, even though I'm an anti-theist, atheist, or anti-religionist, I'm also a humanist, and I live in reality. I don't have this large belief that we're going to get rid of belief. So what I really hope to do, when people always ask what's my goal is to stop hereditary forced religion of children. If people want to believe, fine, let's make it voluntary. Stop forcing your kids to believe shit. You know. I don't see that. If we care about the rights, you know, of every citizen, that should ensue the children's own mind. How is it that the parents' religion then becomes automatically the child's forced choice? You know, I think they have the right, in a sense, to tell their child, "I believe this." I have no problem with that. But saying you have to believe this or punishing children for not believing it, oh man.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I kind of feel like, I don't know if this is just my perspective, and maybe I feel differently about it because I come from Europe rather than America, and back in Britain, to meet someone who literally believes in the Bible is extremely rare. I mean, that's not going to happen on a day-to-day basis. But in America, it really can. I work with two people who literally believe in every word the Bible says.
Oh yeah.
At least they say they do. But I feel like the kids aren't going to church. Like, less and less the children aren't going to church, certainly in Europe. And to compare my wife's family, her parents' generation go to church every weekend without fail. Her generation, none of them go to church in the weekend. So I feel optimistic in a way.
Oh, I'm optimistic. I think that reason will, like you said too, I also know that in a sense, from the beginning of a God's invention, it already has its downfall, because all the stories that have ever been written for gods have always ended up, you know, in a sense, going by the wayside. You know, they lose favor. Even like if Christianity, let's just say, was the one true thing and the Bible was the one true thing, why is there like 172 or 140 versions in English? What? I mean, well, seriously? And then did you know, like, I'm writing a book, so I wanted to use some of the Bible. Did you know the Bible's copyrighted? You can't just use the Bible. I mean, you have the American standard version you can use, but other than that, like, I like the NIV. And if you use that, they will sue you.
I did not know that.
Oh, yeah. I was like, wow. That was a shock to me. Like, wow, you're copyrighted the Bible? Seriously? And there's like another.
To be some really specific kind of copyright, because the Bible is everywhere. It must be like the real specific.
Well, only theirs. Like version. Every version is different. So I agree. The Bible's everywhere. Like the King James, I don't think, it depends on which one you get, but I don't think it's copyrighted. And the American Standard is not copyrighted. I'm not saying all Bibles are. I'm just saying that it's crazy that any Bibles are. To me, it's like it's the Bible, right? I mean, I don't even understand that. But another thing is that So there's like 40,000 different kind of denominations and sects. I mean, if it's the one true thing and the one true book, I don't understand how people, their own religion, do not believe the same. I mean, you can find people in one church that don't have the same, beliefs. Although they probably all think that, archaeology was built by aliens,
I mean, I do wonder what they think about archaeology. What they believe in the Bible. I mean, a colleague who I work with, the colleagues who literally, they presumably believe the Earth is 4,000 years old.
Or 6,000, some are probably.
Or 6,000, something like that.
So like 5,900 and something, but yeah.
Which is way off.
Yeah, way off. Not even close. The Sumerians were watching the world be invented.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do wonder what they think about. Talk about my channel, like, oh, my next video is on this Neanderthal, 100,000-year-old Neanderthal site.
Yeah.
In their head, they don't say it. In their head, they must think this guy's crazy. He doesn't know.
Well, answers in Genesis. I do a lot of research on the nutcase stuff too, not just on archaeology, because I really care about trying to also debunk or understand how they think, so I can address it. So, answers in Genesis. He actually puts tons of archaeology and claims it's all different dates. All the dates are wrong.
Wow.
Scholarly dates are off by thousands or millions or whatever. Like, you'll see something. But to me, he just makes it up. Like, I'd like to know. Okay, so you think that the science is off? What measure are you using? Because it has to be evenly put out. I mean, if you think it's all wrong by 50%, then it all has to be wrong by 50%. You can't. I mean, and then of course, well, how do you justify that 50% or whatever he's claiming? I mean, it's ridiculous. But yeah, he shows. I was shocked because I thought the same thing you did. Like me, what happened when I was in school? Once I was shown the stuff, I was like, okay, I'm done. I mean, okay, archaeology's facts. Here's the facts. I can no longer believe. And then I feel like when I first started talking to people about it, like, don't you know about this? I mean, and then they're like, oh yeah, well, that's not as old as those people. Science doesn't know. I'm like, yeah. And they go, well, carbon dating. I'm like, yeah, but carbon dating, let's just say you're right. Carbon dating is no good past a certain point. But that point is 50,000.
Yeah.
Your point is 6,000. Can we see the problem here?
Yeah. There are other methods like uranium series dating and all of this stuff. They can really measure stuff that's millions of years old.
Exactly.
And all these things, radiocarbon dating, like carbon decays at a predictable rate, and we can count it. It's more complicated than that, but at the basic level, it's decaying, and we can count how quickly it's doing it. And to entirely throw that out of the window, I don't know. I mean, I'd have to say, what else have they got? What other evidence do you have? What's a better way of counting than that? I mean, it's so measurable and so good for that reason. But
yeah, and that's why I feel like they just intentionally are being intellectually dishonest at the minimum. They're just not, to their own self, their own mind. They're not being honest to what the facts are presented. I mean, it can't be. Especially, like I said, just making up and saying, oh, well, no, that's probably about 6,000. It says 40,000. How did you get 6,000?
Yeah. Well, I mean, not being raised in any sort of fundamentalist church, I don't really know what their mindset would be. You would probably understand better. Do you think in their heart of hearts they know that they're misleading themselves?
I'm not sure. So I've talked to Ray Comfort. He's a young Earth creationist guy that does all kinds of TV. He has about $1 million or whatever. He does all kinds of videos and live and chats. He's a pastor. He does on the street. And there's another one called Eric Hovind. I've actually interacted with both of these guys. I think that in a sense they're both, to me personally, it feels like they're lying for Jesus. But there's a little bit different. Ray Comfort I see as a guy who is probably believes it actually maybe more than I feel that Eric Hovind does. Because Ray Comfort, he videotaped me out on the street and talking to him, and he put it in his video. And Eric Hovind, after talking to me on the street for half an hour, he didn't put 1 second of me talking to him.
Yeah.
Because he told me, wow, you're a pretty smart guy. You did pretty good. But his thing is, yeah. But not because I'm trying to win it in a sense. I just have really honest questions and challenges. And he is a bunch of blowhard, and he like intimidates people. Ray Comfort kind of does this also. They'll go up to you and say, have you ever sinned? Have you ever lied? Have you lied before, right, in your life? Okay, you're a liar. You need Jesus. Have you ever stolen anything before? You're a thief. You need Jesus. I mean, it's just... And I told him, yeah, well, hold on before we keep going. I told him, you do believe the God that killed the whole earth, right? The genocidal maniac that drowned the entire population of humans at the time, supposedly. And supposedly all the plants and all the animals. That's your deity? Yeah, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
I'm like...
The Noah's Ark thing is always that, to my mind, the Noah's Ark is almost more unbelievable than God creating the universe in 6 days, because there's probably... Noah, presumably, lived in the Middle East. And, that couldn't be further away from, like, the south of Chile. And I'm sure down in the south of Chile, not to keep harping on about ants, there's probably, like, one species of ant that lives on, like, one island off the coast of Chile. And it's like, you're telling me he got 2 of those ants all the way down there up to the Middle East. They survived.
He got penguins.
And then he put them back.
And kangaroos.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Well, what's really funny too is, to me, let's assume that everything they say, that they supposedly stayed a year on the water without. Well, let's just think. So if the whole Earth's covered with water, let's just think logically. Whole Earth's covered with water for a year. Is there any plant life still alive that's not from the ocean or lives under the water? And the answer would be no. So there's no plants. So let's just say you now let out these 2x2 animals, right? These omnivores, are going to have to only eat the animals that are now there. And then the carnivores will eat the animals that are now there until they're all dead. Hey, nice story. Everything died. I mean, that's...
Exactly.
And the humans now have to...
After the flood would be like a lion, a crocodile, and loads of seaweed or something.
Right, because you would have to need more magic. To make the story work, you need, again, more, not just the other magic, but now more magic. Because somehow these animals have to be able to survive without food and repopulate. I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous to me. It's like,
I find this a lot when I talk to people on the internet about mythology. People who don't necessarily believe in the truth of the Bible, or the literal truth of the Bible, but they might think that some huge flood happened deep in prehistory. And, I always wonder what the evidence is for that, because these ancient civilizations in the Middle East really lived on the Tigris and the Euphrates, or the Nile in the case of the ancient Egyptians. And their entire livelihood really depended on the river. Absolutely 100% they depended on the river for survival. So in that situation, it's no surprise that they would invent mythologies around floods and catastrophic things that would happen to the river that they so depended on. I mean, it just makes such common sense that it would almost be crazy if these cultures didn't have mythologies around floods. Do you know what I mean?
Right, yeah, definitely.
Of course they would.
Yeah, I don't think, like some people are like, oh, our brains are designed for religion. No, our brains are designed to have biases and fallacies. And so we have this natural thing. Besides, like I said, we have a believing brain that trusts too easy in a sense. Trust without evidence, that faith thing. And so...
You don't think our brains are designed for...
No. I would say that animism seems to, that the belief that things might have agency or spirits or something, is that I have a psychology background, in psychology of children up until, for a little bit, I think maybe it's probably 2 or 3 or something to 7. That time, they're kind of animistic thinkers, or it certainly is easy to motivate that. Like, I think there was one where they did a study, I can't remember if it was called Princess Alice or something like that, where they had these kids and they put a chair, and the kids are watching. They put a chair down empty, and they said, everyone, want to introduce you to Princess Alice. Hi, Alice. Good to see you. Everybody, now you need to obey Princess Alice. Now you can't see her, but she is here watching you.
Yeah.
And they left the room. Kids behaved themselves the whole time. Some kids kind of got up, were like looking at the chair, like they would actually thought they could somehow something is there they need to see. It was, but they ended up that the kids that they told that to behaved better than the kids that didn't. In a sense, if they just left the room, the kids act wild, talk, whatever. But when the Princess Alice was there, they were. So I thought that was interesting in the fact that we have that. But to me, it still goes back to our psychosocial thing. It's in other words, I don't think religion itself, like the product religion, has anything to do with our brain. What I think is our brain has a tendency to like certain things or do certain things. We have a kind of a thing where we like traditions, because really what it is, we like safety and comfort. Tradition gives you that safety and comfort. Oh yeah, we remember this. That, memorializing. It's like when you hear a song. When you hear a song on the radio you haven't heard in a long time, maybe you're a kid, you almost like relive the whole experience. Not the song, but like almost being a kid again for a second. Oh yeah, that was cool. I remember that time.
Yeah.
That doesn't make that...
I do that all the time.
Well, but my point is that doesn't make the song magical. It doesn't make the song part of our brain any more than religion, the external product, is a product, I believe, of our brain. I believe it's a tendency, like the song. We have a tendency to be emotional. Well, I think the general is that we have this wrong view. Emotions happen the whole time the mind is awake. So when we're doing logic, we're still emotional. And that's why I think that some people, like you're asking why people believe things or how much they believe, because there's such an emotional component to knowledge or things that when we experience the world, it's more emotional really than just the facts. So to me, there's a high proportion of error that can happen. And so I think that it's that error. And then also, we as a social species don't want to appear wrong. And so I think that makes us often more dogmatic to protect this thing that we think or feels like is offering the safety and comfort. And so it's like more like religion hijacks natural social, I think impulses. Then I would say.
Yeah. I wonder how much of religion now in 2020 is just about like a tribal identity.
Oh, it's definitely become more. And religion has changed. There was a study for psychology I looked at where they had schizophrenics for 70-something years in Texas. And they said they used to have schizophrenics are very prone, by the way, you may not know, I don't know, that they're very prone to like visions and very being like really religious fanaticism. They can they'll cut off their genitals because they're so like religious crazy, or even for people, but often it was themselves. But so when they used to, what they would say is that they need to stop sinning and be in a sense more nice, like you get more, godly or whatever. But now it's more about they're having dreams that go harm yourself because of sin, harm others because of sin. So it's gotten, even for schizophrenics, they can see their religion is changes, which is giving these negative, feeding in a sense to these, mental problems these people are having. They're becoming more aggressive because not that schizophrenia has really changed, but the religion has changed. And then you're adding this, in a sense, toxic religion, boom, on top of somebody who's already having, issues because of their own mental health. And so, yeah, I think that religion, it's like a larva or something that's got into a host. In other words, if we all stop, religion's just gone. Like you said about gods. How do you stop gods? You just stop believing in them, and then the gods are stopped. It's not like rocket science. You need to have all these things. It feels like it sometimes. Like I have to know, like 10,000, things just so I can help someone learn one when it comes to sometimes talking to people. But I think that's why I said once again, I really appreciate your show and shows like that. And I'm trying to do my own stuff that's like that, where I try to offer a lot more, of the facts and a lot less of the bullshit, because I think it's that's really going to help us. And it's amazing. Like I said, if you look out, that's not the majority. The majority of stuff that's out there, it just blows my mind, the stuff that they say.
Yeah, well, I don't even know how sincere people believe in what I would call pseudo-archaeology, some YouTube channels, I sometimes wonder if they believe it or they're saying it because it's much more profitable than putting out a well-researched video, sadly. Like if one example of this is the YouTube channel Bright Insight, and he makes really outlandish videos, unsupported by the evidence. He doesn't put the sources in the description. No one can read for themselves why he's saying the things that he's saying. Does he truly believe it? Or does he do it because when you come out with some clickbait title, 1 million people will watch it, and it'll make him money, Who knows? Who knows?
I don't know, but I think it's doing a harm to the sense. It's like an intellectual abuse. I mean, because you're putting it out there. Just like I remember watching this one show on the History Channel before I became a lot more hardcore in my atheism. I started watching it and I was like, wow, they're talking about catching this, unknown animal, like this, that it may have been a real animal from a myth, right? So they have this local myth and they go out looking and they actually, in this one show, they actually caught it. I'm like, oh, and my wife goes, did you read the bottom of that, that was going along with that? I was watching the show in like little white writing. It says no animals were harmed in this, presentation or,
yeah.
Well, then you didn't catch any animals. What am I watching? I'm watching a completely fake show about a supposed real show that catches fake animals. I'm like going, oh man.
Yeah. The History Channel is. When I was young, the History Channel tend to only talk about World War II. It used to be like just the World War II channel. But they didn't do it inaccurately.
Right.
And but now they just seem to have totally abandoned caring about anything to do with history or anything like that. It's either porn stars, which is just, sure they're dealing with old stuff. That's not really history though. It's just what's the name of that? It's just a pawn shop.
Yeah.
It's not really history. They're just making money off selling stuff. And then Ancient Aliens after that. It's really gone downhill so much.
When Ancient Aliens first came out, I thought, oh, this is funny shit right here. This is like a comedy. This is stupid. Especially the guy's hair was like,
Yeah.
And they kept getting, every show kept getting like bigger and.
Yeah.
But
I can't remember that guy's name.
Giulio or Giorgio or something like that.
Yeah, he has like a Greek name. I'm sure lots of people watching this know anyway. But.
Oh, I'm sure they do, which is crazy. Do you know that there's actual atheists that have like argued? In fact, one guy almost blocked him because he kept like hounding. I said, if you bring up aliens one more time about something I post, I'm done. I'm just gonna block you. I'm sick of it. It's like I said, I've already argued like 4 or 5 times. And showed you the facts, everything you said. Yeah, but there's he's like, oh, how about, aquatic ape theory? I'm like, yeah, that's bull. How about drunken ape theory? I'm like, yeah, that's also debunked. Yeah. Okay, so they're all debunked.
I know a bunch of archaeologists that I follow on Twitter were laughing because that same Ancient Aliens guy was tweeting about the coronavirus and saying how important it is to listen to research and scientific evidence. And it's like, that's rich coming from you, man.
Well, he's got a following, so I appreciate him doing it. But yes, I agree. What a joke. Follow the facts like that guy.
At least when it mattered, at least when people's lives on the line, he was like, listen to the scientific research. But yeah, it's
Yeah, well, I'm glad you bring up the alien stuff because I'm telling you, that really irritates me a lot when people keep addressing that. I mean, I'm like,
I don't know. I think it is a real minority of people that truly believe that. But
or you'd like to think so.
Well, maybe I'm being optimistic.
I'm telling you, I've talked to atheists, like I said, that think that. I'm like, no, it's not. I'm like, well, you need to look at this video. I said, I'm sure I don't.
Yeah. And that's, obviously sitting here in my spare bedroom, I can't say that aliens haven't visited the Earth. Of course not. I couldn't know that. But I do not believe that they would travel millions and millions of light years to make the Nazca lines, for example, just to like scratch a hummingbird in the desert and then fly off again. Do you know what I mean? Like, if they've made the effort to the trip, to make the trip, I think they'll say hello for sure.
Well, and there's just no support for it. I mean, saying that you can't prove it doesn't mean that somehow that's given them proof. There's nothing.
Yeah.
They have zero.
On them.
Yeah, the burden of proof is the one making the claim. They're making the claim. Okay, how did you get to that? Like I said, generally what they'll say is, well, but the universe is so big, there has to be advanced society. I'm like, yeah, that you don't know that. That's a speculation, and you're trying to say it's a reasonable one. But to me, it's the best way to say it is there could have been at some time in the past, or could be sometime in the future, or maybe something in the present that is, life that's somewhat, hominoid or something. I'm not saying that because you're giving and just saying if it has to be now, and because they'll say it has to be now, it has to be more advanced than us, and I'm like, yeah, no, you don't know that.
Well, I mean, if our history of space exploration is anything to go by, the first alien life form we're going to come into is probably a robot or a satellite or something. They're not going to.
Correct.
It's not going to be them. It might be a satellite that they sent out 50,000 years ago, considering the size of space.
Right.
It's just been hurtling along. But
the whole civilization has died now, but yet it's still going.
Yeah, exactly. We find the satellite, but everyone who was the civilization that made it was long wiped out by an asteroid or something like that.
Well, could that or a flu?
Yeah.
A disease. I mean, it's certainly just like people don't realize. I tell them that I know there's not a God because they go, well, intelligent design. I go, okay, I know there's all kinds of argument for against intelligent design, but this is mine. If we look at the history of the evolution of the world, we see a bunch of times there was almost the whole planet goes extinct. Overall, it's 90 to 99% of all life of all kinds has all gone extinct that's ever existed on the earth. If you had a kid that comes home with a test for any kind of subject and he got 99% wrong, not only do you get an F, you got to redo the class. You might have to sit that kid down and what is happening? That's a level of failure so high, it doesn't even make logical sense. I mean, if that was a God's plan, I'm going to have 99% of everything I design fail. That doesn't sound like an intelligent design.
Yeah, not at all. Or even just, I was reading this horrible story. There's so many horrible stories in the news at the minute with COVID-19, but this woman gave birth and 5 days later died of COVID-19. And it's whose plan is that? Who would make that a plan? Why would they do that? Which goes back to the Christopher Hitchens book. If this is God's plan, I don't want to be following it. I don't want to be worshipping it at all.
Oh, I completely agree. Just that's an argument from evil. To me, God will be responsible as the creator of everything for all suffering. All of it. Psychological suffering, does it have to be this extensive? This many kinds? Cancer, does it have to be with children? Seriously, why? How about the fact that it happens, there's so many kind of cancers that can affect us and so many types of childhood diseases. Just the fact that there's a prayer study that they did where people had, heart problems. And the people that got prayed to and knew about it did worse than the people who got prayed to and didn't. And it was not that much different than the people that didn't get prayed to at all. I mean, these people think that they have some sort of a check they can cash at the end of their life, And to me, the money that is the life itself. They're missing out on the best part now, the only part.
There's nothing after.
No, and I understand, like you said, I do understand them. I do. That probably gives me a lot more compassion to deal with religious people because people are like, man, how do you even talk to them? Compassion. I understand. I was them. I was fanatical. I was them where I didn't understand critical thinking. I didn't understand, to have, methodologies to how I think. I just kind of wildly, well, it sounds reasonable, but reasonable why? I mean, well, because I feel it,
And that is, as much as I disagree with a lot of aspects of religion and all of that, it has to be said that over here in Portland, Oregon, the groups of people, the big homeless shelters that are downtown helping the poor day in, day out, they are religious people. They are Christian-run organizations, and I feel like if I have a criticism of atheism at the minute, or at least my participation in it, maybe I'm not looking in the right places, or maybe I'm too lazy or too selfish or something like that, but I don't see like huge secular organizations taking up that mantle as perhaps as much. I don't know if I'm talking.
Well, I was going to say that, you know, I can't off the top of my head, I can't remember now, but there's like 3 or 4 different social organizations that help the poor. There's like, I think it's Atheist for the Homeless. I can't remember exactly. There's also even American Atheists. When I was at their convention in Oklahoma, that I participated in putting together food packets for the homeless at our convention. Yeah. It was like not the whole part of the convention. It was like, you know, I think 4 or 5 hours or something. Maybe 3 hours, can't remember. But anyways, it was a certain amount of time when we took, and a whole bunch of us, not everybody, but a whole bunch of us, you know, did stuff. So I think that the difference is that the religious, you know, have a lot of the money behind them. So, I mean, saying that, like, why doesn't a person who's secular do the same? Well, plenty of secular people give money. Generally, they're individuals. They give money as individuals. And so it's like, say, if Bill Gates gives money and he's an atheist. Well, nobody considers that atheism giving the money, even though an atheist is giving the money. But there are atheists, I'm just saying, so there are atheist organizations that actually do it, and there's plenty of atheists that separately do it. Just like the amount of scientists, you know, are going to be a higher proportion of atheists, and they probably contribute, like you contribute to society, you know, with your knowledge. And so doing that, you know, is a benefit. You said you want to get money, but you're not specifically charging for it. You're just getting, you know, from, you know, YouTube, the potential of advertisement, correct?
Yeah.
Right. So you're doing it as a social service, in a sense, even though you could have secondary motivation. You're, in a sense, still doing something that is a benefit to the public. I mean, someone else could just make a channel, as you said, spout total, you know, bollocks, and probably do better than you're doing, you know? So if you were to support the alien, you know, movement, you would be like, you know, a god or whatever.
Yeah.
So you're choosing not to do that. So I'm just saying that, in a sense, you're an atheist exhibiting the behavior you just said atheists don't do, and yet you are doing it. You're doing that behavior, and I do think that you're doing a good service too for your atheism, because you're not being an asshole. When you talk about people that have these, you know, spurious ideas, you in a sense still try to address it with respect and dignity, and I think that is something that is more common and also in the atheist movement than just, you know, people perceive, you know, from Dawkins or something. I mean, he does not make up the whole of every atheist.
No.
So
I suppose in my head what I was thinking when I was bringing that up is that in Christianity, for example, it's specifically encouraged to help the poor, and there's a lot of other specific encouragements that I would totally disagree with, but helping the poor would be one of them, whereas with atheism, all you can say about it is that I just don't believe in God. Do you know what I mean?
Well, no, not exactly. Because, at least for me personally, I'm an axiological atheist, which means I value, judge the concept of atheism and everything else that goes along with that. It's a philosophy and it goes everything. It's a way to evaluate things. So let's just say I take your thing. I'm an atheist. I now have no false beliefs, or at least not the God false belief. I may have plenty of other false beliefs, because atheism is not a cure for bad thinking. It's just the doorway to the right path to me. So once we stop, in a sense, making up stories about reality, and we stick to reality, then to me, very quickly, we should understand I'm a fragile body. I have a limited time on earth. and then my social impact that affects people. And this is obvious. You don't need to you look at how even an animal. You have an animal in your house and you kick it all the time. It's going to act differently than if you love it all the time. So it wouldn't even take a very high thinker to realize that kind of working together, since we're alone, we don't have a savior coming, we don't have a God to make the miracles happen. We actually just have to do stuff. I think it would inspire us to want to be educated, to make a humanistic society, because we realize that everybody doesn't have to be the same. Like I said about all atheists, some people I talk to, I'm a leftist, far leftist, off the damn deep end. I'm also an anarchist, so I'm way down there in the corner. But I talk to people that are conservative, and I don't, put them down, except that I challenge their ideas, or I explain why I think they're wrong. To me, it's that kind of compassion, because I realize, what, beliefs are not more important than people. And if I can understand that, I need to help the believers to get that your beliefs are not more important than human life. Let's just say you have the speculation about what the afterlife is. Okay, great. Mine's different. But I think right now what matters is like the COVID-19. We need to have doctors helping us in the here and now, right? We all do. Well, whether or not you think there's something else, this right here does matter. So I agree that it's not like a guarantee that you're going to have this reason thing, but neither should an atheist be assumed to automatically trust science. I mean, most would, because you're stuck with reality, and the best test or method of understanding and grasping what could be possibly the best understanding of reality is science. That it leads you to you don't have a choice. To me personally, I don't see how I have a choice. And the people have this thing too that I think is wrong. They think that science is common sense. Like if they can kind of grasp it. No, there's some things that are science that totally violate common sense completely. Like right now, I don't feel like the Earth is moving, correct? It's not spinning. It's not revolving around the sun. It's not doing anything. It's fixed still because it feels like it's fixed still. Yeah. But we know because of science, the Earth is rotating and it's flying through space. I mean,
tens of thousands of
right. Right. So common sense alone would go, yeah, that's not true. That's why I think I can get why those common sense people, the Earth looks flat, must be flat. That's not how science works. And that's not how you get your feelings. Feelings is not, in a sense, a great way to do science. Just feelings. Feelings can maybe get you to investigate a hypothesis, but it shouldn't be like the reason that you actually, confirm or believe things.
Yeah. Well, on that note of flat Earth and things like that, do you think that the internet is a help or a hindrance?
Both. Both.
With sharing these ideas, yeah.
I think that the internet does both. I mean, people have become, to me, in a sense, more knowledgeable because of the internet, and more ignorant also because they learn lies. So just think of it. Some guy in his basement says ancient aliens are true. You're not going to have this humongous like cult religious following that the ancient aliens crap has. You wouldn't. It's their videos, it's their things, it's their ability to get it out to the world. If they're just in their basement coming up with these bizarre ideas, smoking a joint or whatever they're doing, or dropping acid. I feel like I'm flying. Must be that the Earth is flat, or I don't know. Yeah. Somehow I think it's just ridiculous that even the Greeks could basically figured out the Earth wasn't flat, and yet these guys still think it is. I mean, what?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people as well are really into military history, and military history is by far the most popular form of history on the internet. And it's like artillery officers have to take into account the curvature of the Earth when they're firing a shell 10 miles, 20 miles into the distance. They have to account for the curvature of the Earth. And many people will know objectively that has to be done, but also have an opinion that the Earth might be flat or something like that. And like you said, from the perspective of walking along the street, sure, it's flat, whatever.
Common sense.
But the second you do anything that has to take into account a long distance, everything falls apart if the Earth isn't round. All your measurements, everything, it totally falls flat. falls flat. Sorry, that was a poor choice of phrasing.
Well, no, you're just being humorous as you do on your show, right?
That wasn't deliberate.
Oh, gotta throw in those laughs.
Yeah.
But really, I would say psychologically, it interests me. Why is that so interesting? Why? Why do lies about history appeal to people more than the truth? I mean, I think the truth itself is pretty amazing. I mean, like I said, some of the
amazing.
What's that?
More amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, wow, this stuff happened, and look what they did. It's absolutely mind blowing.
Yeah.
The real facts. I mean, you don't even have to go to the ancient aliens, or just like the other thing too. That Graham Hancock. I don't like that guy. Not personally, don't like him. I mean, I don't like his pushing stuff because I believe that he like walks a line that looks like it's closer to archaeology, but it's still not.
Yeah, I mean, Graham Hancock's an interesting one because he doesn't often talk about his ideas. He likes to paint himself as just a journalist connecting the dots and just asking questions and things like that. But when you read sort of the last chapter of his book, he does have an idea that he doesn't promote openly because it would make him seem crazy, and that is basically that an advanced civilization existed sometime in prehistory in either America or Antarctica, and that the reason we don't see evidence of them is because of their possible hallucinogenic drug use, that they have attained a higher plane and had no need for material culture or anything like that. And at the same time, he argues that they didn't need material culture. He also alleges that they build these huge monuments, which is the ultimate expression of material culture in a way, building a pyramid. So Graham Hancock's a real funny one, and people really love him, and they listen to the Joe Rogan podcast and things like that. And, you know, he's a good speaker. He makes a convincing case, but again, you just scratch below the surface a little bit, and it all falls apart. It all totally falls apart, especially his views around Göbekli Tepe. I was watching an interview, and he said Göbekli Tepe is where all agriculture all around the world.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I heard that. My next video, I've already have set queued up. I'm actually addressing it. I'm like, no, it's Othello 2, and it's 23,000 years ago. And then barley in Egypt was done 17,000 years ago. And then there's in Jordan, there's the 14,500-year-old, pita bread or bread of some kind.
Yeah. I mean, we've been experimenting with plant use for tens of thousands of years. We've always eaten plants. And it is only in the last 10,000 years that we developed agriculture, but just his assertion that the Middle East taught the whole world agriculture does not support the evidence, because, for example, in Papua New Guinea, they farm yams. So you're saying the people that built Göbekli Tepe, who were growing wheat, traveled all the way across the world to teach someone in Papua New Guinea to farm yams? It makes no...
Well, speaking of that, I've heard someone try to tell me that people from Australia went up and built Göbekli Tepe. I'm like, oh my god, no.
Yeah, because of that one symbol that's on that one picture of an Aboriginal gentleman, and also a somewhat similar images on one of the things from Göbekli Tepe.
Right.
But all it is two hoops and a line.
Right.
Like,
Which it could easily happen, in a culture. I mean, it doesn't.
Yeah.
But let's just say it is. Is one artifact, one random artifact, is that enough to know the whole culture? No. Even if they were right, you still couldn't say, okay, so all you could say is it seems like these two are the same. Even if you could say somehow DNA, that there's some kind of a thing, that only helps you that they took one similarity. So even if that was a small transfer, which I don't think it was, that still doesn't mean everything else you believe. It's like all your beliefs, every single time you have a new claim, it has a new burden of proof. And so every little piece, you would have to say these people were connected. Or maybe there was a person in between that showed both of them this symbol. And that's all they don't realize too, is there's been symbols like 25,000 years in France. And then some of the symbols seem the same, but it still doesn't mean it's exactly the same people. Even if someone did the same thing, even if I transferred and you started doing that symbol, that doesn't mean even you're using it for the same reason. It's like the phone game, So someone tells you an idea, you may even keep maybe the core of some of it, but then you change, and certainly how many generations? Like I go back to Tepe, I tried it in my video. I'm like, it changed over time. Even if it's the same people we're talking like 1,000 or 1,500 years of time span. Even if they wanted to be somewhat traditional, I doubt they're exactly the same. And the site certainly shows it's changed. At first it's like a more of a egg or circle, and then it's kind of a different longer one, and then square buildings, and then how they're using the buildings and how they're doing the size of the T-pillars changes. I mean, it's obvious things changed. I mean, it evolved.
Now that you bring up the size of the monuments decreasing in scale, people often bring up on the video I made about it and on other videos I've seen about it that, that's not the way technology works, like we're on this inevitable path of progress, when really progress like that is not inevitable for a start. Civilizations rise and fall, demographic pressures change, culture changes, and I always think from my small town in England, the biggest building in the town, and by far the most artistically intricate, is the cathedral, which was built in the 13th century.
Right.
And now our level of technology is far beyond what they had access to. But if you just were looking at the size of the buildings, you would say, oh, well, they were clearly more advanced in the 13th century. Like, this is the problem with archaeology.
I agree.
When people read too much into it, and they have, I don't know, maybe they have ideas that progress is inevitable, that our evolution was inevitable, that this culture's success was inevitable. And none of that is inevitable. There is no inevitability to anything, really. There's no pattern, no scheme, no design. It's all chaos, basically, in my opinion. Like, we're lucky to have gotten to the point where we've gotten to. It wasn't an inevitability.
Well, yeah, just like I think there's a picture of a horse or someone in Iran, I think it is. I can't remember now if it's 10,000 or something years old. It shows him on top of a horse. There's no evidence of anyone riding a horse, but someone might have done it. And then obviously though, that's not when horse domestication fully happened. So that's like closer to 5,000 years ago. So you have this humongous time span where what were they doing? It looks like just flat out riding a horse, but it may be, that someone was doing it for hunting, or maybe they were doing it as a test of manhood, jump on the horse, and just prove that I, could be, manhandle it or whatever, like kind of with bull riding. Yeah. So it doesn't mean that they were actually continually riding horses at that point. Go ahead.
Yeah, you could even say, did the artist even have an appreciation of perspective?
Yeah,
like
true.
You look at medieval literature, like the book in the medieval period, they're besieging a castle. The people are as tall as the walls.
Right.
Like, because they have no...
Well, that's a good point. What if
hadn't developed an idea of perspective and scale and all of these
And what if it was symbolic? What if he meant the sun was riding the horse's back in a sense, and it wasn't even a person, but he drew it as a person, and now we're interpreting it, oh wow, horse riding. And that person drawing it may have thought, this is my god, and they're riding, the sun is on the back of the horse or something. I mean, it could have been something, symbolic that doesn't have to relate to the actual behavior we're giving it.
Yeah.
So I know that just like to me, like a lot of the bones that people see as cannibalism because they have exarcation things, I think that some of that could have been possibly, for sky burial, in a sense, giving it to birds or even giving it some other animal. And
any form of, there's so many different kinds of secondary burial ritual that it could have been, and at the same time, it could have been cannibalism. It could have been both. But it's it's so hard to talk about anything definitive in prehistory, and archaeologists know that as well, and they're very careful in their language. And I think the whole field gets very misinterpreted by the likes of Graham Hancock, deliberately or not, and misleads people into what archaeologists actually believe and what they say, because you can only come to reasonable conclusions with the evidence you have. Some stuff like DNA testing, that's pretty exact, because it relies on something that's quantifiable and can be measured. Same with radiocarbon dating, things like that. Those things we can speak about with a lot more confidence. But when you ask why someone did something, why were they doing it, you can only really come to a reasonable conclusion from the evidence, because...
Well, yeah, you take a logical jump, not a leap of faith.
Yeah.
Well, there's a big... People act like the same thing, To me, a logical jump, like I like, let's just say, like, for instance, those Neanderthal those eagle talons, they have the holes in them. Because they have holes in them, because they have wear patterns in the holes, and polish marks on the other parts that are probably were laying on something, and had light movement to buff them, it would sure seem like it was worn. More wild speculation, because you're taking fact, and then just what could be a reasonable solution for what these facts seem to present. I agree. Yeah. Even if I have a high confidence, that doesn't mean I know for sure. But there's a higher confidence that could have been jewelry than aliens landed and built, the pyramids. I mean,
there's no evidence to support that.
Right. So, well, that's why I think it's hard too, because when you say, even an archaeologist says a speculation, like I heard, which I actually going to take the little clip of him talking about sky burial, the one you had about Göbekli Tepe, and put it to my 2-hour video about sky burials and connected to all the different Europe and different areas in the Middle East and stuff. But I thought it was good, but it's still funny to me because what he says is a reasonable idea that matches the facts, unlike Graham Hancock. And so, but it's still speculation. And so I think that it's like, it reminds me of when people say theory, well, science, the evolution is just a theory. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand, a scientific theory explains, laws. Like I said, well, if once a theory is a law, then I'll believe it. I'm like, well, good, you start now, because the theory explains the law. So, there.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of misunderstanding of like scientific literacy and all of these things. There's just so much misunderstanding between these terms. Like, what everyday life we use the term theory. It's probably like a 50-50, it's just my idea, I don't know, it's just a theory.
A speculation is probably a better word for it.
Yeah, but in science, a theory has a specific definition, and it's an idea that is supported by a lot of evidence. It's not a theory if it's not supported by evidence.
Exactly. But that's what I'm saying too. I think that it's hard because a person who believes, say, Graham Hancock, he listens to your show or me, and I'm saying speculation. And they don't know. Graham Hancock, same. He doesn't know exactly, either do they. And so that's not true, because he's making it, like he talks about Atlantis, like, oh, yeah. So if we're going to go for the story of Atlantis, then you must think somewhere over there by the, tip of Spain, that's where, the Atlantis is, because that's what it says, something close to that, I think, in the Greek myth. I mean, it doesn't say it's in Turkey. Where he says that it's possible Atlantis actually relates to Göbekli Tepe. It's like, yeah, what? No.
I know, yeah. The Atlantis idea is really popular on the internet, at least judging by people's comments on YouTube, for sure, and the videos produced on YouTube. And it really is, like, when you listen to someone speak about Atlantis and Plato and all of these things, it really is very obvious that his sort of plot device of Atlantis being a long time ago beyond Spain, that was like the edge of the world to them.
Right.
It's the same way as us saying in Star Wars, like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. That's the furthest distant point we could conceive of.
Right.
And it's obviously fiction, and Plato writing in, I don't know when exactly, but sort of 300, 400, 500 BC. To him, beyond Spain, beyond Gibraltar, that was like the edge of the world. That is like the perfect setting for this fantasy and all of this stuff. And we only have one source for Atlantis. That's just his story of it. No one else has ever written anything about it.
Well, they try to say there's some stuff to Egypt that might reference something like that. And the DNA from Egypt does go to Crete. I mean, and there's, I think, even an evidence of the Egyptians going to Crete in a trade thing.
Yeah, I can believe. I mean, people traveled.
No, I know. I'm just making a comment that, because I've looked into this stuff more. That's all I'm saying is that, yes, I agree. The only Atlantis stuff is, from what you said. But I'm just saying there is some reference to Egypt moving in that general area, kind of. But that would be still towards, Greek, not out towards Spain.
Yeah, and again, Plato writes things like, Athens was in a war with these people and stuff like that, and he's set 9,000 years ago. And even though archaeology is not an exact science, we know Athens did not exist 9,000 years ago.
Exactly.
Like, not a shred of evidence.
The Turkish people hadn't arrived yet. No, well, they weren't really Turkish at the time, but the people from the west coast of Turkey hadn't arrived yet, I should say.
Yeah. Before the Neolithic, before all of that.
That's right. Well, isn't it like 7,700 or something like that, or 7,900 is the oldest in Thessaly, I think it is, in Greece?
It's probably going to be around that. Knossos is 7,000 BC. But yeah, you'll look for the Neolithic arriving in mainland Europe.
It's like 9,000 years ago, roughly.
9,000 years
ago,
yeah.
But when they first came in, that they didn't immediately just start killing people.
Anatolia and more mixing the further it spreads out across Europe, especially northern Europe, much more mixing. But that's not to say that even in the Balkans, where there's less evidence of marrying and children between these two groups, that's not to say that these people fought against each other, because farmers can live at a higher density and can support a higher population than hunter-gatherers.
True.
For the most part. So some people would have fought, some people would have just started living together. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but even when you say hunter-gatherer, and then farmers, it's not like the early farmers also didn't do hunting and gathering sometimes also.
Exactly, yeah.
It's not like they just...
Yeah, it's like our language is not good at explaining the complexity of history, and you just have to think. Like, you really just have to think and not deal with extremes and things like that. But the thinking is the hard part. That's where a lot of people doubt.
Yeah. So could you tell us what's your favorite video that you've done or favorite subject that you've covered?
I don't know. I suppose the one I did about the Younger Dryas, pretty proud of.
Can you go ahead and explain the Younger Dryas and also explain the, sort of woo-woo or stuff that I think is sort of reaching out to the pseudo-archaeology or whatever that relates to that?
Yeah. This is very closely connected to the Atlantis idea that people talk about. So, off the top of my head, roughly 12-ish years ago, 13,000 years ago, the Earth's temperature, at least in the northern hemisphere, dropped. And we had about a 1,000-year return to Ice Age conditions. Or at least the temperature of the Ice Age. And most people think of that as, like people are living on glaciers. It's not really like that. You probably want to think of the climate being more like Siberia is now. Of course, very cold winters, but punctuated by warm summers. So like a continental climate it returned to. And associated with these periods is like an increase in the rise of sea levels as glaciers melted after the end of the last ice age 20,000 years ago. So there's all this stuff going on, colder temperatures, rising sea levels, and it may or may not have been caused, at least helped by some sort of asteroid impact. That's the big debate at the minute. But people point to this period as the cataclysm that wiped out Atlantis. It killed all the megafauna in North America and South America. And it's basically painted in a lot of circles as this cataclysm to end all cataclysms. But when you look at the evidence, it's really not like that. We don't really have that much evidence of it affecting human civilization that much. And with regards to wiping out the megafauna, it certainly may have helped the decline of some, but megafauna had been going extinct a lot earlier than the Younger Dryas. Megafauna survived much longer after the Younger Dryas, and really the connection to whether megafauna lived or survived is their proximity to humans. And by megafauna, I mean animals over 40-ish kilograms. It's like a specific definition. And generally, there are less of those animals around now, and they seem to decline as humans expand across the world because, for a hunter, that's brilliant. You kill two of these animals, you're feeding your whole group for a week, probably. So it's no surprise that we would favorably hunt such large animals. And the other thing to bear in mind is agriculture, within sort of 2,000 or 3,000 years, agriculture basically appears around the world after the Younger Dryas. And, the Graham Hancocks of this world would say that is because the survivors of Atlantis spread out around the world and taught everyone agriculture.
Yeah.
But really, the mainstream view, in my opinion, the accurate view, is that after the Younger Dryas, in our time period, our geological time period now, the Holocene, temperatures have been much warmer on average and much more stable. And it's that warmth and stability that allows people around the world to consistently experiment with the same plants reliably. Farming requires reliable weather, and this warm, reliable climate allowed people to continually grow rice or wheat or yams or corn year after year, century after century, millennia after millennia. And after 2,000 or 3,000 years of this time period where they were allowed to do that, agricultural societies developed. And the reason we don't see agriculture develop in earlier examples of food processing, like you mentioned at Ahalo 2 in Israel, where humans are really intensively using plant resources 20-ish thousand years ago,
Right.
is that maybe they could do it for 100 years, 200 years, but then the climate takes a tumble again, and they're forced to adapt. So,
Well, I think that's when people think of hunter-gatherers, I think they don't realize, to me at least, I didn't realize, I should say, that when I read more stuff, that they could have already been gathering seeds anyways and just eating them. I mean,
people really overemphasize the hunting and don't appreciate the gathering side of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that he makes it like somehow they had to have some external source, to come up with it. And it's like, yeah, if it's already, you're hungry and you're already going in the environment, I don't see why that wouldn't have been an option. It probably wouldn't have been the only option, obviously, but I mean, I don't see where it's so complicated. And I really don't like his thing about his ancient society that supposedly knows more and did better stone tools. It's like, no, there's a bunch of ritualism that happens about 13,000 or so years. So a little bit before Göbekli Tepe, and even like Korka Tepe is like 12,400 or something. And they're already doing also. It looks like they have wild grains, but they could be in the process of trying to farm them. And so his thinking that Göbekli Tepe like started it all, or no, the whole area was kind of doing all these behaviors, and they already, like you said, the archaeologists know that more than one person probably came and a group came from different areas, because the stone tools, there's stone tools that are like 300 miles away. Not 300, maybe it's a little less, but it's vast distances. So people were absolutely or somehow trading to that area, and certainly it would make more sense that if they traded, they just, went there. If you wanted to say cultures are influencing it, then it probably was everybody in the area. Like a communicative approach to Göbekli Tepe rather than some kind of a grand design.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, even anyone who cares can read the second chapter of this book, Stephen Shannon, First Farmers of Europe.
Cool.
Gives a brilliant introduction to the origins of agriculture in the Near East. And, domesticated traits in plants have to evolve. They have to be selected for. So when we're thinking about the emergence of agriculture, whether it's in Europe, well, I should say the Near East, China, Mesoamerica, Papua New Guinea, wherever, you want to think about it as like a period of several thousand years. And when we excavate something in archaeology, it seems like a snapshot.
Right, yeah.
But these things go on for generations and generations. You want to think about these in periods of time that last thousands of years. Like you said earlier, we see Göbekli Tepe, and it's these huge monuments covering this huge area. And it's like, wow, how did these hunter-gatherers build such a huge monument? And the answer is, they didn't all build it in one go.
Oh,
it was
no.
used for an incredibly long period of time.
Exactly. And that's what I was saying. I think that people, they just try to look at everything and get like a quick, cliff notes about it.
Yeah.
And that is the problem, that to really explain and understand it, you need a lot of support and a lot of stuff. And a little, 5-minute video is probably not going to give you what you need to fully understand.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. At a certain point, you can distill information, and I certainly try to distill information. But at a certain point, the distillation becomes like misinformation. Like some complex ideas sometimes require a large amount of time to get to grips with. But
I agree. So, is there anything that you're looking forward to doing in the future?
I do have some plans for the channel. I did want to visit more archaeological sites this year, which at the minute is all obviously on hold.
So about the next video, is there any one that you're looking forward to doing?
Yeah, definitely. I really want to do a video, and I will do it soon this summer, on the African Iron Age, which is a big area of debate in the archaeological community, because there's a big debate as to whether sub-Saharan Africa learned to produce iron from North Africa, or whether in fact they were the first area of the world to start producing iron.
Yeah, I had thought I read something that said that they thought that the iron producing was local.
Yeah, it's a big debate. For sure they were producing iron locally. It's just whether they got that initial idea from North Africa or they just came up with it themselves. But for sure the African Iron Age is contemporary to the Iron Age in the Mediterranean world and Europe. And in some cases in Europe, it's before.
But doesn't the iron already starts, though, the use of it in like ornaments and stuff, I think, doesn't it? Before the Iron Age, it's really after the Bronze Age collapse that motivates this, because all of a sudden these big, empires were importing a lot of tin and, copper, and then putting it from different sources, and then putting them together to make bronze. They didn't have their own. So once you cut off the supply lines, you got no more bronze tools. And I think that could have, been a motivation to get this new metal iron.
For sure, yeah. That's why the debate isn't so strong about sub-Saharan Africa, because they didn't go from the Stone Age to producing copper and then bronze to iron. They went straight from stone to iron. And obviously that's not how it happened in Eurasia.
Right.
But at the same time, just because it happened one way in Eurasia doesn't mean it has to happen that way in every part of the world.
True.
And, there are sites in Africa where if the dating is to be believed, they're producing iron about 800 years before the Near East. Hard thing about radiocarbon dating, this is where the nuance is that they're radiocarbon dating charcoal in these furnaces, but the radiocarbon dating can only tell you when that charcoal was produced.
Right.
So, for example, I could use 1,000-year-old charcoal to make a knife today, and from the archaeological perspective, it would look like I made that knife 1,000 years ago.
Right.
Because you can only date the charcoal.
That would not be good.
No. So this is where the debate is, and there are other dating methods to get around that and to come up with a more definitive answer. The hard part is that more sophisticated dating methods cost money, and African archaeology is just an area of archaeology that's consistently underfunded. For obvious reasons, the countries do not have the resources to devote to it that a Western European or American country does.
Right.
But it's an interesting debate. I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out it's inevitable. As I say inevitable, after I went on a rant about how nothing is inevitable. I believe that
you speculate.
Yeah. I believe that in the future these resources will be available to African archaeologists and they'll be able to definitively settle the debate. And I do believe, it's my speculation, that Africa will be the first place to have produced iron tools. And by that I mean forging iron, because people, even way back in prehistory, would take iron from meteorites that doesn't need to be forged because it's just being forged by the conditions of space.
Right. Isn't that wasn't there an iron, speaking of that, wasn't there an iron dagger, I think, in one of the pharaoh's tombs or something, and they found out it was from meteorite, I think, or something like that?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. People for a long time have realized that you could bash meteorite iron into a dagger and things like that. They just didn't realize that you could also dig it out the ground and forge it.
Right.
So iron tools and knives and things like that do really predate the Iron Age by a long way. It's just that they were extreme luxury items because
that's why the pharaoh had it.
Yeah, exactly. There was probably 1, 2, 3 iron knives in the whole of the kingdom. And
Right. And it was small, and it looked like a little dagger, like someone didn't actually use it, just ceremonial.
Exactly, yeah. You only had as much iron as was in the meteorites.
Right. That's all I was going to wrap it up. I appreciate you giving me your time talking to you, and I really enjoyed it. And I want people to all know to go and check out this guy's channel, like all his stuff, subscribe to his thing. I'm going to make a blog, too. This will go in so that way, because I have a lot more people on my blog than I do on YouTube. YouTube, I have about 2,500. My blog, I have 55,000. So.
Oh, wow.
So I have way more on there. Some people that sort of follow me in all the things. Because I have a Facebook page that has 45,000. And I have a writer page that's 10,000. So.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm happy to have done it. It's been fun.
Yeah, and I have tons of atheists, so definitely. And atheists generally like science and evolution, so yeah.
Yeah.
All right, man.
More than welcome on my channel.
Yeah, and I really appreciate it, and thank you, and I hope that this gets you some more exposure, because you deserve it.
Thank you, yeah, thanks very much.
All right.
All right, thanks, Damien.
All right, bye.